What's the greatest obstacle or challenge facing you on your path to becoming financially free? For most of us, it's the time it takes to even focus on it. We're so busy with our lives that we don't even know where to start. Come join Joey and I and the team in Nashville, Tennessee, August 9th through the 11th, as we break down the different ways that you can become financially free and introduce you to different strategies and speakers who can help you on that first step.
You have questions? This event is designed to give you the answers, to take action fast, to turn the decades it's taken us to learn this and turn them into days. Don't hesitate. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/live. And don't forget to use the promo code podcast to get a deep discount.
Okay, let's break down this in three different ways. We've done this in each podcast episode so far as we broke down the four different investing styles from the DISC profile. So the D, we went through that. That was the driver. That was the decisive person who loved to get right to the results. We also broke down the I profile, which were the influencers. Those are the people most excited about getting in the flashy things that have people involved and things that they can share with their friends. Then we went through the S profile, where those who loved being a part of a process, being within a group, always thinking about how this impacts other people, and they want the steadiness of the process. So as we break down the C, we're going to look at what are the different options, right? So we have a passive income matrix. We can't give you all 15 options that we've listed, but we're going to list a couple of those, give you the ideas of how this impacts from a C's profile. Also, we're going to talk about the things that are going to trip you up as you go through this. And lastly, we're going to give you some examples of people that we see at our highest level within our masterminds who are having the most success. All of these are lessons that we can all apply to help us get more like those successes that we're hearing about. So Mark, I'm going to let you go first. Give me an example from our passive income matrix that you like as a C, and talk a little bit about why that's a win.
I like long-term rentals. Real estate is always something that I've always, enjoyed and liked. And if we stop and we think about it, if a C is trying to minimize or mitigate risk exposure and so forth, housing is one of those things that is always going to be necessary in some way, shape, or form. So one of the great things about a long-term rental, right, looking at a single family home as a C person, it's systematic, right? I can create a process where I can evaluate and vet properties. I can look at cost. I can look at rent. I can look at expense. It's scalable. I can grow this thing. There's opportunities for management. I can be as involved in this passive income opportunity, or I can take as much of a step back as I would like by hiring someone else to manage those systems for me. So you're getting to dabble in things, and so you can find efficiencies. There's a lot of data. Ernie said spreadsheets. Oh, man, I have spreadsheets about spreadsheets that talk about spreadsheets. It's great. And the greatest thing about a spreadsheet is they're horrible for anyone else who tries to read them, except for the person that made it. So to Ernie's point, yes, when someone tries to show me their spreadsheet, got to take a breath, because you need your little Orphan Annie decoder ring sometimes to figure out where some of that data came from. And so that market analysis, right? You get all those things you can check box through. And so I'll leave you with this too, is, as a airline pilot by trade, you want your pilot to have at least some measure of a C, because they like checklists, they like follow through, they like taking things to completion, and they are risk averse. And that also translates into the real estate world.
I think the C may stand for contingency plans, right? I think the C is great as not is if option A fails, what is option B? And if there's not an option B, then move on to a different option. That's what I've learned from being around smart people like yourself who are C profiles. How about for you, Ern?
Well, I agree. Long-term rentals are great because I think a C profile, for the most part, has a long time horizon. And long-term rental is exactly that. It's a long-term strategy. And so I think just the nature of making money in multiple different ways over a long period of time is very attractive. I can see that. I like that too. But for me, I love land investing. This land flipping model, when I found it, just made a ton of sense to me. for a few reasons. One was I realized after buying real estate that you win on the buy. The thing's going to work out when you win on the purchase. How you sell it needs to go right, but if you don't purchase it right, it's hard to sell it right. And in this land investing model, there is a process where you can buy these parcels of land for pennies on the dollar. And I like that. There's a lot of safety in that when you know that you've done well right when you bought the thing. I like that. I also like the safety just in the model that we are selling these with owner finance notes. And there's a lot of protection in land contracts relative to owning real estate and what it looks like to evict or to change, and the cost of losing that property and land that just doesn't exist. So there's a lot of safety there, coupled with the returns. For the C, that's not the most important, but it is pretty important that you make a killing on these properties when you buy them for pennies on the dollar and sell them for retail, and you finance the deal. There's just a lot of winning there. But I think the biggest thing, this is what really appealed to me, was when Mark Podolsky, the land geek, our land investing buddy, the guy that we love to interact with in the passive income mastermind, and many people in the Wall Street community have relied on to teach them this model. When he said that you can be successful in land if you just follow the recipe, that this is a process to follow. He'll give you the steps, and if you follow it, you'll do well. And for a C, to know what steps to take and where this is all going, to see the clear outcome, that just checks all the boxes and is ringing the bells for that C profile.
I think what I've learned from working around a lot of C's over the years, and that I think that maybe many of you listening may be a C, because that tends to be the person who does research. They tend to love to listen to podcasts, watch videos, because they want to take in all the information to be able to then start applying it. I'm not saying if you're listening to this that you're RC, but there's a lot of chance that you have some tendency. So I'm about as far high of an I as you can be, but I love listening to podcasts because I love that little part. I love that learning part. I love to see the coachability that exists in different aspects. And so you guys both talked about real estate, lots of education around real estate, whether you want to be a person actually doing it, being hands-on. I see a lot of C's that do that, but also there's the ability to invest hands-off, but you can see and learn really quickly about what makes it go right, what makes it go wrong, and you're going to do the research so that you avoid some of the mistakes. Land flipping, coaching, lots of process, lots of systems, follow the recipe. Well, as I sit here and look at our passive income matrix, man, there's so many to choose from. But from a C's perspective, I've seen people that are in that C profile gravitate to e-commerce, which is a really popular one because it has a system to follow. It has a systematic process. There's coaching that you can get. I see people jumping into syndications, because syndications, you can look at track records, you can watch trends, you can get into asset classes that are not new, that have been around forever. I also see people that love to do private lending because they're like, hey, I'm just going to take my cash and I'm going to lend against an asset, and then I can underwrite not only the individual, but I can underwrite the asset class. So those are three areas that specifically I watch people in our masterminds have the most success in addition to what you two just said, because of those things, coachability and consistency within what they're doing. Now, Mark, let's talk a little bit about the things about the inner dialogue that you have with yourself as a C. What are some of those things that trip you up, but also talk about it in relationship to the asset class that you mentioned, long-term rentals.
Oh, well, the challenge becomes people. When you're dealing as a C, you like a system, you like a process, you like everything to move very mechanically. At least that's the way that I approach it. It's awesome when everything just goes as step 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 10 without a hitch. Where it gets a little messy and it really starts to challenge is now there's outside forces. You have a tenant. You have no control over that tenant. That tenant can choose to pay rent. They can choose to take care of the property. Or they could be like the individual who rented one of mine during COVID and paid for 1 month and then got an 11-month stay for free. Turned it into his own little personal hoarder's paradise, which is incredibly challenging for a C because now all of a sudden I've lost control. It's outside of my hands. I have to go through a different process. So hospitality also is not necessarily, I'll only speak for myself as a C, it's not necessarily a strong suit of a lot of Cs. That's why they have that cockpit door on the airplane. It's not actually for anything other than to segregate the pilots from the passengers, because we're probably going to say the wrong thing.
Oh my goodness. See, get yourself closed off from others, maybe. Mm-hmm. How about you, Ern? Talk a little bit about things that may trip up a C in the land flipping space, but also just internally.
Yeah, I can relate to saying the wrong thing. I get that. 2 thoughts. Number one, I'm approaching this personally as a passive investor. And passive means not necessarily in control. And so any passive activity for a C who desires to be in control at all times is sort of difficult. So the ways that I've set up long-term rental real estate and land investing is with people who are operating that for me. So property managers and a manager of the business who's overseeing many workers, many virtual assistants who are doing that. And so for me, the investor, the owner of the business and the investor as a C, I'm sitting there having to learn how to manage the managers rather than manage the process. And that has come with all its own challenges of learning how to do that extremely well, but also learning how not to jump in at every moment when things go poorly. For example, when the property management company sends me a quote to have a tree taken down, and I know that if I spent 30 minutes, I could call around and probably find a quote for a third of the price. And so learning how to manage relationships and navigate conversations to get the best result, because we always want to see profiles are going to be good at what they do. And if they're not the ones doing it, they're going to want to make sure that it's done really well, have really high standards. So learning how to manage is one thing. And then here's the other. For the C profile who is doing land investing, there is a clear process to follow. Check these boxes and you'll get it done. The other side of the business might hit right at the weakness of a C profile, and that is selling. Selling, not talking about the features of this piece of land, but selling the piece of land to somebody who wants it. And that can be a real challenge for someone who's spent all their time learning how to do great due diligence and set up systems and dreams about systems and loves making sure the deal works in spreadsheets and loves to be the person that other profiles bring deals to vet and get guidance from. But when they're in the sales seat, might struggle if they haven't worked that muscle and learned that skill. So that'd be the other area that can trip somebody up.
Tribe, listen up. We're entering into the election year. This is the time where people are going to get super fearful. We're going to see businesses start to dry up. We're going to see opportunities, though, pile up for us only if we're prepared.
That's right. You get to choose right now. Will you allow this time frame to negatively affect you in your business and your investments? Or will you be prepared to take advantage of these huge opportunities that come on the backside of this because you're prepared with cash?
Let's get our house in order. If you haven't already maximized the infinite banking concept in your life, here's the chance for you to start learning. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/IBC. Take our free webinar so that you can start getting equipped with the things that you need to know so that you can take action on this looming event.
One of the things you commonly see with a typical high C profile, really good technicians, right? Someone who loves to do something excellently and as you mentioned earlier, struggles managing people because really it's the trust in that person to do it as well as you can do it, right? Like That's really what you're thinking about is like, can someone else really do this as well as I am? And one of the flaws or one of the things that you have to be careful of as a C is that sometimes you get really narrow focused in those things and you get head down And one of the things that I hear from my C's is like, oh, I didn't see that thing coming. Once they start operating something, they put their head down. But, imagine driving a car and only looking at how fast you're going or what the, temperature gauge says. You might run into something, right? So not being able to look far enough out into the future can be something that could potentially trip you up because you're focused on the very specific details, following the process. You typically are very task-oriented as compared to project-oriented. So one of the things I would say to someone who is a C profile, looking to maybe get into an area where you start doing the business for yourself, is just know that and go out and get that coaching, get the education on maybe how to manage people. Like, what does that take? You're going to be an excellent student. You've probably made great grades up to this point. That's not going to be hard, but it's learning that trade. All those things can be learned. That's the beauty of it. But just know that that's going to be the one area that you're going to have to work on, as you said, or work that muscle, is being able to look out into the future. If I think about like e-commerce or something like that, obviously there's the potential of, the inefficiencies in supply chains, that's what you're dealing with. If you're, getting into the private lending space, you're going to have the concern over people paying you back and the dealing with the specific structures around what to charge and what not, because those rates can change. You can set them, but also at the same time, you can negotiate them. And that may be a little bit foreign to you, right? Like you just want to follow a specific process. Learning how to adjust your prices that will allow for market trends and fluctuations may be something that you have to work with. Or if you're into, one of these syndications, it is trusting ultimately in people that maybe not right there next to you. They're, a lot of these syndications are going to be operated typically in states outside of where you are. And that's going to be one of those control things that you're going to have to really better understand about what all can be involved in it that could potentially get out of your control. And those will all be potential stresses that you have. So understanding how to mitigate and adjust to those as they happen. Let's wrap this up by talking a little bit about some wins. We've seen a lot of people in these areas have success. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about some success where you've seen a high C within our community and some of the things that they've been able to do?
Yeah, there was one. He started out doing roofing. He was a roofer, had involvement inside of a roofing company, and things just didn't quite line up for him. And then he stumbled upon, like Ernie said, a system, a process. He stumbled upon land flipping, and that process, that systematization, the ability to research a specific way for a specific type of client avatar at a specific price point, specific size of property. He's now turned that into a growing real estate or land investing business. That now they are actually going out and raising capital, doing larger deals, even bigger deals. And it's really cool to see because he does not look stressed at all. I'm sure it's like a duck, right? See the top, it's all calm, but underneath the feet are going furious. But he knows which way he's going. And he's got a process to move through. And it's so cool to talk through it with them and hear how they've built this thing and what it's grown to.
Well, I know you're talking about Brian. And one of the things I love about Brian is that he's, like you said, gifted in the fact that he's been able to partner with other people who did have that forward-leaning profile that were more project-oriented or more future-oriented, if you will. And he could use all those systems that he had organized and partnered with somebody. So I love seeing how you take these profiles and you put two together and how 1 + 1 = 3. And that's a pretty cool thing. How about for you, Ern? Who's somebody that you've been able to watch, and how could we model and learn from that situation?
Yeah. I know a couple who have, like Mark, got involved in land investing business. And this couple was going to work together. The husband is the high C profile. The wife is an S. But working together, they've crushed it inside a year, built that business, $6,000 a month, recurring passive income.
Is that good?
Hey, would you like to, if I said to you, hey, you're looking for financial freedom, here's a path. If you like following a recipe, if you know that there's 250 other people who we can point to pretty quickly and show you that they've had success. If you just follow the steps that they've done and you're able to execute upon that, and you're able to get the $6,000 a month within the first year, would that be interesting to you? Well, that's what they've done. And they've done it so well because this husband has been able to set a clear goal, clear vision, plug his wife into the training, who had the time and capacity and the capability to execute this. And they've been managing this business together, willing to grow past just being the technicians in it to getting other help in place to scale pretty quickly to be able to get to this point, knowing that they're going to go far beyond it. And so the point is, they've done it together. To your point, Russ, the C might get so focused on the gauges that they don't really look out the windshield at where they're going. So having the wife's help, certainly in that, I know is important. Also somebody to enjoy the process with, because the C can be so goal oriented that they don't enjoy anything but thinking about the future and maybe getting some enjoyment from discontent about where they are relative to that. So enjoying the process and scaling has been the huge thing for them. I'm so excited for them because this has unlocked the door for them to start an e-commerce business as well, and also bring in some other family members to partner. And that came from the C having a big goal, setting out the metrics of what it takes to get there, knowing that they could do it, and getting started in earnest.
You made me think about a great book that Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote called The Gap and the Gain. And I've seen this because my wife is a C, right? She was a dentist. And one of the things I think the discontent that happens in that perfectionist is that it's never perfect, right? Mark, you said it, the Japanese have a phrase. What is it called?
Almost good.
Almost good. And almost good is as perfect as they could be, if I remember what you said is correct.
Yep.
Well, in that, so if you are a high C, this is a great book for you to go read because it helps you understand that the horizon is never achievable, and we have to measure not against what's in front of us, but measure against where we've come from. And a lot of this process, as we teach in What's About Wall Street, is really to help you get to financial freedom as fast as possible, but also be able to measure some of the successes that you have along the way, right? There's a lot of things that we've done poorly in our past because we didn't know any better. No one was there to necessarily teach us what was to be done correctly. And so we were making some of those bad decisions, and then light was shined upon those, and we were like, let's don't do that anymore. And that's across the board. We've all made those mistakes. As a C, sometimes it's harder for us to accept that because the biggest fear a C has, at least I've been told, is being incorrect, right? Being wrong. So being able to recognize that some of the things that we just didn't know at the time, but we don't have to be wrong a second time, right? Once we have that information, then we can actually move forward with the better information and apply it. But we also know that we're going to continue to make steps. We can watch how far we've gone. So I think about in the C profile also just the ability to not need to reinvent the wheel. That's what I love about a C that I don't possess. I'm always trying to reinvent something, but what I've noticed in you two guys is find something that has success and just keep going after, keep doubling down, keep doing the thing that continues to produce profit. Well, I've seen people in the C space be willing to follow that process. So I've seen people in the e-commerce space. We have a friend of ours. I'm going to be hanging out with him here in a second. He just crossed over $20 million in sales over a 4-year period of time after starting a business in the e-commerce space. I've got 2 other friends who started businesses in the e-commerce space, and they're now hitting $4,000 and $5,000, sales, and they're in their first 6 to 12 months. I mean, it's crazy to see the success of just working a process over and over, finding the right people to be with in that process, and then just crushing it. So there's so many opportunities for you as a C. Don't let just the few that we talked about today be limiting to you, but just to give you insight as to how that could potentially help you win, but also the things that you need to be considering as to avoid it. Now, if you're not a C, hopefully you found value. If not, if this is something maybe your spouse needs to hear, who is a C, or a friend of yours who you know is a C, where they're like, you've been trying to get them into this process of thinking outside of Wall Street and how can they continue to grow their passive income journey, having more passive income than they have monthly expenses. Forward this home to them. Please take time to rate and review the show. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for listening. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.